Okay, this is it. We're starting. Cultivating Innovation. I'm going to talk about best practices for encouraging and growing your team members' ideas. Really, we should qualify that. Your team members' good ideas. Let's jump in. I should mention we're recording this for posterity. We'll provide a link to it, so if you ever wanted to go back and review, you'll be able to do that. We have a YouTube channel. CFE LOD, I think, is how you get there. DHRM CFE, and the CFE stands for Center for Excellence, but we're on it too. Anyway, you can find all of the off-the-shelf stuff there, and this presentation will be no exception to that. You can go check it out. Okay, Cultivating Innovation. That's me. I'll be presenting today. I work with DHRM. I'm in the Leadership and Organizational Development Group. My email address is right there, rsmurdoch@utah.gov. I want you to take note of that email address in case you ever wanted to engage on leadership topics. We're here for that very purpose. Our team exists to provide support for leaders in the state of Utah. We do coaching and training and all kinds of stuff to help leaders do their jobs better. So hang on to that email address if you want to talk more about leadership and things like that. Feel free to reach out. Okay, before we jump in, next month we're going to have another one of these like we've been doing for the last couple of years, off the shelf. This time it'll be about organizational pride, and Dr. Dan Chase of the LOD team will present it. You see there that it'll be on September 28th, Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. And he'll talk about how organizational virtue and competence create pride, the relationship between pride and employee self-identity, and then you can see there, obviously, I'm reading from that list, challenges to organizational pride in the public sector, and ways that leaders can better create a sense of pride. So that ought to be pretty interesting. Put that on your calendars. We'll send out an email invite for you to sign up about the first week of September. Watch for that. You can sign up. It comes from the HR kind of spam. That's probably not the right word, but the whole state will get it all at once. Let's just say that. All right, let's look at the agenda for today, what we're going to talk about. We need to kind of talk about the power of stories when we're talking about setting culture, and that's really what we're going to talk about today, setting a culture of innovation. So we need to talk about the power that stories have to help us do that. I will also talk about how to amplify and implement good ideas, and then we'll talk about building that culture of innovation. In February of 2021, about a year and a half ago, my colleague and friend Dan Chase presented one of these off-the-shelf presentations on creativity and innovation. A couple days ago, I reviewed that session, and it's very well done. I recommend it as a companion to what we'll be talking about today. I'll post a link. I'm going to have a resources page at the very end of this presentation. We'll send out the slides when we're done here, and I'll post a link there to that presentation. We'll also send out, anyway, like I mentioned, we'll send out these slides at the end of it when we're done here today. Dan, in his presentation, covered creativity and encouraging ideas from our people, for leaders. Today's discussion will mostly focus on what to do with those ideas when they come along. So we're not so much going to talk about generating ideas. We're going to talk about what to do with ideas when we hear them. And specifically, hopefully, today we'll talk about how to make it more likely that a good idea will go from being a wrinkle in someone's brain to fully implemented, a thing that we now do. We'll also cover how capturing stories is important to developing culture in our work groups, and even at the agency level, not just at our team level, but at the agency level. And we'll talk about all of this in context of building the culture of innovation. I've shared this quote before, so some of you with great memories might remember this. We kind of have to start here. This is a quote from Václav Havel. He was the last president of Czechoslovakia and the first president of the Czech Republic. So he oversaw the transition away from communism in the 90s. And he gives this perspective. The constant increase of entropy is the basic law of the universe. So it is the basic law of life to be ever more highly structured and to struggle against entropy. You may also remember this chart. I want to kind of go over this because innovation really is a matter of survival in a lot of ways. Any process, we'll call it status quo here. This line, that is a line, right? It represents some process or the status quo. By the way, this is Lewin's three-step change model, and I'll kind of point that out as we go along here. Let's imagine this line just represents a product or a service, a task or a process of some kind. And as it moves through time, it starts to degrade a little bit. Our effectiveness is hard to maintain over time. There's a slight downward slope. Eventually, given enough time, the process or whatever it is fades or becomes obsolete, it fails. In order to progress, we have to adjust for that. It's true for most things: processes, people, animals, buildings, landscaping, roads, my cognitive ability. Just about everything is on a slow ride towards entropy. And without some sort of effort to put in positive change, it's really hard to stay effective. That's where good ideas come in, right? Someone has an idea. There it is. Someone has an idea that might help us with improving this process. And the ideas often are kind of nebulous. They're not concrete. So we've got a dotted line here. And obviously, an idea is not something that is immediately going to be picked up and used. But once they are picked up and used, they become an innovation. Now, there's a gap there, though, isn't there? There's something that has to be bridged here, and we'll call that implementation. There are 3 steps to getting this working. The first one is when we are stuck in status quo. Status quo can be a pretty powerful thing, the inability to change. We have to start thinking about what we're going to do in the future. We have to find a place where we can start to kind of thaw our idea or our status quo, where we can make a change and make it into something that's going to be a little more effective for us. The idea comes, and then we start talking about it, right? Hey, this process is getting a little old. We probably need to talk about what we're going to do in the future. Yeah, we probably need to change that. We need to change that. And then we've got this idea here. That's a pretty good idea. Let's figure out how we go from where we are right now to this new idea. And we do it just in the nick of time before things fail, right? Anyway, we find our new innovation. Eventually, we have to freeze that new innovation. It's no longer new. It's the status quo, right? It becomes the new normal. And we move along until it's time to do it all again. This is Lewin's 3-step process. The 3 steps are thaw, implement, freeze. And if you look at this chart, we basically are kind of moving into chaos here. This is entropy right here. It's not a great looking chart, but hopefully it makes a little bit of sense that we have to somehow bridge those gaps. And these good ideas that we're having have to be implemented if we're going to continue to move up stay effective, I guess is what I'm trying to say. My friend, colleague, J.J. Acker gave an excellent off-the-shelf presentation some time back called Navigating the Human Side of Change, where he really talks about helping people deal with this part. There's a lot of us that really struggle with change. So the implementation part is some transition, is what he calls it in his presentation, is kind of important. I'll share a link for that as well at the end of the slideshow. Okay, with that as kind of foundational background, let's talk about, I need to share a story, and I hope that you can forgive me for this, but because it's a personal story, and I'm going to tell it from my perspective. I didn't go out and ask anybody else's perspective on this, because I think that's kind of the important part of stories, is that we see them from our own perspective. So someone who has more information on this story probably would say, yeah, he got it really wrong. But let me tell the story. I worked at UDOT. I started my career there as a leadership trainer, HR leadership manager, the HR office, and I worked there for about 12 years. And when I first started there, the Cal Rampton complex, there was a cafeteria, kind of in a kind of an annex that's attached to the main building. And also the Post Academy was located on site. It was in a nearby building. And a lot of the cadets would frequent the cafeteria. And when the Post Academy moved to the Salt Lake Community College Miller campus, the cafeteria kind of started to struggle. Then when Governor Huntsman implemented the 4-day work week, the cafeteria was just no longer viable, and it closed. And so there was this annex, this building over here that was empty. And I had an idea. I thought, what if the cafeteria were made into a learning center, a place with classrooms and kitchen facilities where conferences and training could take place? And I told my boss that idea. And I told the comptroller my idea. And I told the deputy director my idea. I told lots of people my idea. A few years later, they start remodeling this place. And you can see the sign there. This is what they called it, the Utah Department of Transportation Learning Center. Wow, that was my idea. Now, honestly, if I'm being totally honest, I had absolutely nothing to do with the decision-making process on what they did with that space. I have no idea if me talking to people about it even had any influence at all. But here today, right now, I'm taking credit because it was an idea that I had and that I shared with people. I kind of doubt that anybody else would give me credit for that, those that make the decisions over there. But I want to show you this place that they created out of this old kind of dilapidated cafeteria. They turned it in. You can see, I went there, I snuck in yesterday and took some pictures. You can see this common area here, conference rooms. These are cubicles for people coming from out in the regions that might need desk space. There's obviously a ping pong table there now. There's kitchen facilities. There's a break room and a couple of training rooms and some large conference rooms and some really, really nice facilities for meetings and training and learning. And I feel great about that. I feel like I'm part of that. That's what innovation and idea implementation can do for employees. I never looked at budgets. I never looked at plans. I never made any input other than to say, hey, that would be good to have it as a learning center, but I feel part of it. My idea somehow became reality, whether it was something that I had something to do with really or not, is almost hardly matters. UDOT does this pretty well, actually. I want to share another story. Our team, the leadership and organizational development team that I work with now, decided that we would talk about the culture of innovation. We decided that on July 31st of this year, just a little less than a month ago. And on the 2nd of, yeah, John Haygood mentions that the computer room now at UDOT is much better than it used to be, which was in a dungeon. On the 2nd of August, an email went out, and most of you saw it and signed up for this training on that day, on the 2nd of August. Also on the 2nd of August, Carlos Braceras, who's the executive director of UDOT, he sent out this tweet. And this was just a few days after we decided that I was going to cover innovation as my topic. And I saw this tweet and I got really excited. He said, "This tool, designed by our Region 2 sign shop, enables signposts to be raised using a truck-mounted winch. It saves time and money by reducing staff and equipment needed for repairs, and it allows work to be done more safely for our workers and our traveling public." And then he has a couple of pictures of this invention that the sign shop over at Region 2 made. Like I said, I got really excited. I saw this as a perfect example of a culture of innovation. I emailed the Region 2 director, Robert Stewart, to ask about the crew, who they were and who had worked on it. He told me to go talk to Jason Kessler and Dexter Forbush, who work on the sign shop there in Region 2. And so I spent some time with those guys, and they told me all the process that they went through to get to this invention that saves time, money, and is more safe. I'll do my best. Now, if Jason and Dexter are on here, my apologies, because I may not get this exactly right, but I'll do my best to kind of explain what they told me. Right here, this is a rendering of a sign that is attached to the top of a wall. I made this in PowerPoint, so forgive me. The sign wouldn't have been rounded; it'd be rectangular or diamond shaped. These are shapes put together to appear to be cars. This one's coming towards us, and this one over here is moving away from us. These signs that are attached to the tops of these walls, they're a bit of a hazard, right? If they were to break off and go into the traveling public, we'd have some real problems. So they're designed specifically that when a certain amount of force hits them, they fall down. They just lay down. And one of the issues that the sign shop had is that when the signs lay down, they have to go back out and put them back up. And it takes, some force from above to lift it back up into place. And so they would have to take their big bucket truck and with a crane on it out, and it would take a couple of hours, and it'd take several trucks. And those big bucket trucks, we only have, this amount of space in our shoulders to work in, and the big bucket trucks are kind of big. And so it's starting to impact the traveling public. Another way they could do it is just go out there and have someone jump up on the wall and pick up the sign, but that's 250 pounds, and it's a very narrow wall. In fact, you guys you'll start to notice these now that we've talked about them. You probably never noticed this before, but now that we've talked about them, you'll see them everywhere. So they had this problem, and their team started to kind of ruminate on it and think about it and figure out what they could do about this. They realized that their truck, at least one truck that they had in their shop, was outfitted with a winch on the front. And they're like, well, the winch could pull it up, but we have a problem because we've got to come down and get it and pick it up. They thought about it, and they put together kind of a test out in their lot so that they could see what they could do with the sign, and they played with it, and they came up with the idea that is pictured in Carlos's tweet. And let me just let Jason tell the rest of this story. We're going to jump to about a minute into this video.
Train, or somebody has to stand on.
Let's go right here.
Take the back bolt off that bracket. You set this, which we call the saddle lift. You'll set this over the back bolt, the opposite of which way the sign's laying. You'll reattach that bolt. Now this two units actually become one unit. And then what we've done is we've taken a bracket. We built this bracket, which you can open up and clamp over the round or square pole. The square post in the center, you can open this up, slide it over the pole, close it up, lock it up. This way, the pole can't come out of this bracket, so it's safe. You don't have to worry about it coming loose when you're moving it around. There's a anchor bolt on top here so it doesn't slide, so you can wedge it onto the pole. This cable here, it's 3 feet of cable, actually goes through the two rollers. When we hook our winch to this side, we can get different angles to it. It doesn't matter how close we get to it. We don't have to be right on it. We can be back a ways. Your winch can pull on a diagonal angle, up, down, sideways, whichever direction you need. As it pulls up, it'll stop it. It'll keep it from going past the threshold to falling on the other side. That way it's safe. It doesn't fall back over. It can't fall forward on you. We built it here in the shop. We drew up the plans and stuff. Total unit cost us about $1,800 total with our labor in it, right, with all the material that we had to buy for it. So before, when we were using a crane for us to go do it, take about 2 hours to do everything. And this is with 3 employees, a bucket truck for 2 hours cost, a trash truck, a tonner, and a service truck. Our total cost on that is about $890, right around $900 to do this. Now, when we go out and stand it up, we use 3 guys. We can use a trash truck and a pickup truck. Our total cost is about 69 bucks. It's eliminated the use of bucket trucks. If we use a bucket truck with a crane, we have to have somebody certified with a crane. In doing this process, you can do all the work from the emergency lane. Any pickup truck that has a receiver on it can be used with this unit to lift these signs up. Doing this
I will stop there. What a great solution. Faced with a problem, the team got together, put their heads together, and figured out a solution that did a lot of things. Made it easy for them to fix their problem. Notice that in both processes, it took no more than 2 hours. Saved the state a bunch of money and made it just easier for them. They did it as a crew. There were several ideas, but they went out and worked on it together and came up with this plan. I love it. UDOT's pretty good at this. I wanted to tell that story because this is the kind of team where good ideas can flourish. And also, I wanted to point out that UDOT captured this idea, publicized it through both this video that they created and through Carlos's tweet. In fact, UDOT has a group within it called within their research division that is specific to to innovation and capturing those things. Oops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. The manager of that group, the innovation program group, is Winston Inouye. He's been with UDOT for a while. He's a former colleague of mine. And so I asked Winston if he wouldn't mind just jumping on our call today for just a second and kind of talking through how UDOT has implemented this culture of innovation. Winston, are you there?
Hey there, can you see me?
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Rick. I don't want this to come off as a complete UDOT show, but I do want to share some of the
We're
good
going to
work.
move on from UDOT in just a second.
Okay, excellent.
We definitely want to put a bow on this for sure.
Yeah, I think UDOT has done a number of things that help really drive innovation in our organization. And I think, some of the examples that you provided, one of those is that our executive director is sending out tweets about good work that's happening at UDOT. And another thing that Carlos does is he appears at our new employee orientation every 2 weeks. So when new employees join the organization, he comes in and he talks about the importance of innovation. He talks about how the population in Utah is going to expand, and we're not going to be able to meet the demand for the traveling public by just adding more lanes. He talks about the need to think about things in new ways, coming up with new solutions. So right from the get-go, when people join our organization, they're hearing it directly from the top of the organization that there's a support for trying new ideas. There's an encouragement to think outside of the box and to try new things. I think the other thing that UDOT does really well is that they create an environment for grassroots level support. Like, for instance, the sign and guardrail shop region 2, right? Here today, people are coming up with better ideas, and these guys actually put their ideas to work. They tried a bunch of different prototypes and they developed a solution. And so we really encourage people to try new things. One part of our program is we have an innovation council. It's an 18-member council made up with people from all different parts of our department, representing all the different parts of the state, since we have people stationed throughout. And it really is a great way to be able to collect ideas, and also they become sort of the ambassadors for the program. They go out and travel to team meetings and really promote that notion that people are encouraged to share their ideas. I mean, we really believe that people aren't coming to work thinking, I think I'm going to do work more in a harder, more difficult, more costly way. I think everybody's showing up to work thinking about how they can make their job better or faster, or how they can save money or make it safer. And really the notion of our innovation program is how can we encourage people to share those ideas, right? So that when people come up with different ways of doing things that help save money or are more efficient, that they can pass those ideas along to other people who then can implement, right? And we can scale up any good ideas. So that's really the type of culture. Just to back that up, we have 2 full-time employees dedicated to this innovation program. We have a website. We use the learning portal as a collection vehicle so that people can both submit their ideas, share ideas, and they can also look up ideas that have been submitted by other members of UDOT. So really, that's kind of the culture, right? It's both the structural side of the program, but it's also just making sure that the people understand the culture and this encouragement to try ideas, to share ideas, and indeed to adopt the work from other people. Thanks, Rick.
Great. Thank you, Winston. Appreciate your time. Great advice from Winston Inouye. He's the innovation program manager there at UDOT, and UDOT's doing it pretty well. Did you know that Utah has a chief innovation officer whose job it is to aggressively upgrade state government efficiencies, innovations, and responsiveness to Utah residents? Many of you know Rich Saunders. He led the Department of Health for a while. I know him from his previous assignment to that. So I reached out to him when we were putting together this presentation, and I was able to chat with him for a little while last week. And I wanted to ask him about the governor's efforts in this area of innovation and kind of see where he sees the state being and where he'd like to see us go, as his role is, innovation within state government. He kind of hopes to help us, those of us who are executive branch employees. I think that's probably everyone on this call, public servants who work for the state of Utah, to truly consider the customer experience when it comes to interacting with the public. That's the area that the governor and Rich Saunders would like to innovate in, is that customer experience when we're interacting with the public. One of the great things about this is that we actually are part of the public, so we can kind of see in real time how it's going with our efforts. He said that the state of Utah should really, as far as its interaction with the public, should be seen as one entity, regardless of which agency or communication channel customers are interacting with. He also mentioned that Governor Cox was serious in his early 19-point memo. You remember the memo that he put out really early on in his tenure, that we should be recklessly good. So far, we've seen a couple of adjectives here, or adverbs, I guess: recklessly and aggressively. So they're pretty serious about making changes that would be considered good. In other words, I think we have some permission to figure out ways to do things better. We have permission to be innovative. I've added a link in the resource page that's at the end of the slideshow to a 6-minute video on this very topic that the governor and Rich Saunders' office put together. It lays out a vision for state services, really, and it shows how it should feel for the public, and how seamless it ought to be and can be. But it will take a culture of innovation to implement it. The video is particularly focused on those of us who have contact with the public. One example that Rich gave when we were chatting last week is, and it's a great example of this focused innovation where we're thinking about interactions with the public. It's where the tax commission recently changed the titles of their agents. They changed their title from agent to service rep. And they also changed the focus of the agency from enforcement to helping taxpayers navigate a complex system. Now, I didn't take a minute to speak with Commissioner Valentine, so I don't have details on that, but I love the idea here that we're just thinking about, okay, if our focus actually is the customer interface and when we're dealing with the public, then yeah, that changes a lot about what we want to do. We want to be service reps, not enforcement agents. And that doesn't work for every agency, obviously, but it works in a lot of places, doesn't it? Okay, with that kind of as background, let's take a look at some processes that might help us as we start to innovate and build a culture of innovation in our teams. Back in May, Harvard Business Review published an article called How the Best Teams Keep Good Ideas Alive. And a link to this article you'll find in the resources page when we send out these slides. 3 college professors from NYU, Harvard, and Yale, NYU, Harvard, and Yale, they work in the schools of public service, healthcare, and management, respectively. So, in other words, what they research on really does kind of brush up against what we do as public servants. And thanks to Lori Economy for introducing this article to me. And because I'm going to rely on it pretty heavily for the next few minutes. In the article, they refer to a process they call voice cultivation. And voice cultivation is a blueprint for building a culture of innovation. They point to some studies that indicate that taking a nice cross-section of perspectives from an organization where you touch various levels of hierarchy and you solicit ideas initially improves innovation. It also helps employees feel valued. It helps them avoid burnout. But one thing that it doesn't do very well, just getting people's ideas doesn't add to implementation. It doesn't really do that. Implementation is a separate process. And it's risky to go out and solicit ideas without some process that helps with implementation. Your best people tend to leave under those circumstances when they're giving all these ideas and being creative and coming up with solutions, and then none of them are ever implemented. It gets frustrating and people leave, especially the best people who have other options, right? It reminds me of a study, and some of you have seen this, has kind of made the rounds on social media recently, so you may have seen this. I was skeptical that this study actually existed, so I did a little research to find it, and yes, it does. Back in the 1950s, some researchers took some rats, and they threw them into buckets of water, and buckets that were deep enough they couldn't touch the bottom, and slippery enough that they couldn't climb out. And they just watched them tread water until they gave up. This is terrible. Hopefully we wouldn't do this in a lab today, but in the 50s, they got away with a lot of this kind of stuff. And we can take the lessons from it, hopefully. Anyway, they waited until they gave up. And initially, the first time they threw them in the water, the rats gave up after about 15 minutes. It was hopeless. There was no point. They weren't getting out. They can't touch the bottom. They gave up 15 minutes. Right as the rat gave up, they grabbed the rat and pulled it out of the water and saved its life, let it recover. And then they'd put it back in to see how much longer it would last this time, if any. And yeah, the rats treaded water longer this time. It went from 15 minutes to 60 hours. Introducing hope, and I'm sorry to use that as the example, but it's a powerful example. Introducing hope into a system increases endurance. So if we're not implementing our people's ideas, but we're asking for those ideas, then it's like the first time that the rat goes in the water. Once we start implementing an idea here and there, hope is introduced to the system and our endurance goes up. Even if it's only just a small number, some good ideas have to be implemented and praised, publicized, similar to what UDOT did, in order to keep good ideas coming. The article references a company that they studied, and that company implemented only 1 out of 4 good ideas. And good ideas were ideas that they actually tracked, looked at, said, yes, this is a good idea. Only 1 in 4 of those ever actually ended up implemented. They didn't necessarily comment on whether that's good or bad, but I think that's an okay rule of thumb. We can start there. We don't have to implement everything. We can't implement everything, but we are looking for good ideas, and we're looking to get some of them implemented and working. And I've got a list of tactics that these professors laid out for us through their study that we can use as leaders to ensure that, or at least to make more likely that good ideas make it into the implementation phase. So let's look at those. Here they are here. Well, it's called voice cultivation. That's the process. And the tools for voice cultivation are amplifying, developing, legitimizing, exemplifying, and issue raising. We'll look at each of those a little bit more up close. These are meant to be tools that are applied strategically. In other words, we use the right tool when and how it will be most effective. So we can mix and match them, we can switch them up in order, we can reinterpret them, et cetera, et cetera. These are meant to help with the thaw phase from Lewin's model. You remember the thaw phase on that chaotic model that I showed you earlier? Also to help keep these tools are also meant to help keep good ideas alive when they're dismissed early. Sometimes if we're adverse to change, or we're in a hurry and don't have time to really think it through, and we dismiss good ideas. These tools will help keep those good ideas alive so that they can make it to implementation phase, or at least they're more likely to come to implementation. Anyone can use these tools, anyone from any position of power, but they're particularly powerful when a leader leads out with each of these. So a leader employing these tools gives permission to his or her people to employ the tools as well. And let's look at each one of these. First of all, let's look at amplifying. Amplifying is pretty simple. This is likely what happened with my idea at UDOT, the idea that I take credit for. Really, it's just a matter of publicly repeating someone else's good idea through multiple communication channels. So in multiple meetings or through emails, newsletters, whatever. Publicly repeating someone else's good idea. That's amplifying. This is an important skill for folks who generally have less power. If you're kind of, if you're maybe just an individual contributor, you're not necessarily leading the team, this is a good skill. Sharing each other's ideas within the team, and an important part of this is giving the proper credit to the person who had the idea. So you share the idea, you share who had the idea. Dave had a good idea the other day that I think is worth talking about. Oh, did you hear what Stacy thought about this? This is a really good idea, I thought. This ensures that by sharing the name of the person who had the idea, it ensures, or at least helps with the temptation of the person in power to take credit for the idea. You know, leaders of teams and their team puts out something, they do get some credit for that. But it is important to acknowledge the person who came up with the idea originally. Repeat or echo good ideas in the event that they are missed or not valued, and recognize the person who brought them up originally. Amplifying ensures that good ideas are not lost. All right, next, if I can find my cursor. Developing. Developing is as simple as just asking clarifying questions. Developing is giving the idea the benefit of the doubt and avoiding immediate dismissal. Sometimes we make snap judgments, and it may be wiser for us to try to quell that instinct a bit. It doesn't hurt to ask a few questions about an idea that's brought up, especially when something new is presented. Our brains are kind of looking for ways to interpret new ideas. We like to find patterns, and we like to compare them to things that have happened in the past. And a new idea is instantly compared to some old idea, and a value judgment is often made based on past experiences. For the developing tool, we really should remember that the future just hasn't happened yet. This strategy is particularly helpful in interdisciplinary teams. Teams where people from different professions and genders, different backgrounds, often will speak past each other using different jargon and linguistic patterns. The difficulties and opportunities posed in an idea that are salient to some may be invisible to others. So developing this tool, developing one another's ideas, helps make them legible across the team. So we've got people from, this might be really helpful as we try to make the state of Utah into one entity, and we're dealing with multiple agencies, or we've had a lot of agencies merge recently, and we're probably getting a little bit of this. Developing or asking clarifying questions will help us through this. It really will help us in accomplishing that vision of one entity for the state of Utah. The next tool is legitimizing. Legitimizing is kind of vouching for the idea. This is almost the opposite of developing. This is where we take an old idea that was successful and we compare it to this new idea. Hey, remember when we did this? This is similar to that. This is how it might work. If we don't have something to compare it to, we can also just do our best to describe in some detail how it might work today, how it might work in our situation right now, and try to give something concrete about it. The next one is exemplifying. Similar to legitimizing, exemplifying is to actually try it. This is where pilot programs often sit. Prototype builds, test audiences, beta tests, iterations, etc. In our group, the Leadership and Organizational Development group, we say, let's put it on the porch and see if the cat licks it up. Or we say, let's fly it up the flagpole and see if anyone salutes it. The idea here is that we're going to test it out in, you can use whatever metaphor you want. Usually we actually end up saying, let's put it up the flagpole and see if the cat licks it up, mixing our metaphors. But whatever metaphor you want to use is great. But the idea here is that we try it, usually in a controlled and safe environment. We try it, we gather data, and we see that if it works, we check out to see if it works in practice. This tool is relatively effective when it comes to change-averse decision makers. When we're trying to convince a decision maker who are pretty averse to change, it allows them to test the waters without committing. Pilot programs, right? And then we get some data and we get to see if it actually really works or not without, breaking the bank there. It's similar to what the sign crew did out in their parking lot, where they kind of built a prototype wall with the sign on it to test their ideas. And then finally, issue raising, publicly calling out issues with the idea. We like, in fact, the studies that this article references say that the easiest way to kill an idea is to not bring up its weaknesses. So part of the tools that we're going to use for an innovation culture include publicly calling out any issues that we might see with the idea. And we're also pointing out weaknesses and trying to solve those weaknesses at the same time. We're openly generating solutions to the issues. And this is helpful because supporting an idea doesn't necessarily mean unconditional support. We are not going all in on an idea that might not end up working. We want to find out what it is that would stop it from being successful and address that as well. This helps us avoid that pitfall that we refer to as groupthink, right? Groupthink is most often found in homogeneous groups that value consensus. And who doesn't like to be in a group of people that are very much like themselves and that like to agree with each other, right? Homogeneous groups that value consensus are everywhere, and it really can lead to groupthink. So we need that devil's advocate as part of our team. We need somebody that's willing to step in and say, hey, what about this issue? Our initiatives may not be successful if we don't get that. The best teams encourage healthy conflict. There's just no doubt about it. They talk it out, they work out a solution, but they encourage somebody to point out why this might not be a perfect solution. And the thing is that, as we grow in our careers and we become less and less focused on ourselves, we start to just want to do the best possible work, right? We take pride in doing a good job. And so finding perspectives and pushback is a welcome and wonderful thing when we're trying to do new things. So issue raising, that's our last tool there. That's voice cultivation, the name of the process. These are the tools. Let me show you just a couple of examples of how you might use these. Again, these are meant to be used strategically. In other words, you can mix and match, and you can reorder, and you can reinterpret whatever you need to do to make them work for the situation you're in. Use them strategically. Here's a situation that you might face. The decision maker doesn't see the idea as feasible or important. So you take these three tools, the Legitimize tool, the Develop tool, and the Raise Issues tool, and you'd start to talk about how it might work in your situation. You might ask clarifying questions of the person who has the idea. You might bring up the weaknesses in the idea and talk through them. If somebody doesn't see it as feasible or important, there's a reason for that. You got to root that out. Now remember, these are ideas that have come up through the creative process and are there and are waiting to be talked about. And we've deemed them good ideas. We don't have to do this with bad ideas, right? We need to make sure that we remember that the ideas that we're looking for are good ideas. Okay, so let's, here's another roadblock we might face. Stakeholders who don't want to give up work or endure some change. Got stakeholders out there that like to hang on to the job they've been doing for 20 years, and this new process will take some of that away from them. Or maybe they just don't like change. Here's what the tools that we can use from our tool belt, our voice cultivation tool belt. We can amplify the idea by talking about it with everyone. We can develop the idea by asking clarifying questions and making sure that the stakeholders who are resistant are asking their questions. And then we can legitimize by describing what it will mean for their lives at work if we do this new thing. We help them see how it might be a good thing. Here's another challenge we might face. Stakeholders who don't want to take on additional work or risk. They're like, I'm good where I am. I don't want to do more, and I don't want to be exposed to risk. And again, we can use these tools here on the right there. We can ask clarifying questions through the develop tool. We can raise our issues, make sure that we've covered them and made sure that we found solutions for them. We amplify by talking to the idea with lots of people, and we legitimize by describing how it would look in their lives. One last roadblock we might face. Decision makers who don't see that there's a problem. This is a tough one, right? Again, we pull out that amplify tool. We develop by asking clarifying questions and making sure that we have answers to those questions. And then we exemplify. We find a way to do a pilot program and show them how the world might be different. We give them specific data on how it touches our work lives and how it might be a good thing. Okay, those are your tools. We got 5 of them now. We'll send out this slideshow and you can review them. I recommend getting them started. Use them in your teams. Those of you that are leading teams, give permission to use these tools. Make sure that your culture is starting to change towards this culture of innovation if it's not already there. I think many of the agencies within state government are already there. We're already doing this. This is kind of review. But let's codify it. Let's make it intentional. We're doing it naturally. Let's make it intentional. I know I told some stories. I told my personal story about me. I told some stories from some crew at UDOT, and we talked about Rich Saunders and what he's doing, a couple stories there. I know there are lots of other stories out there, and stories are so important to us as humans. Before written history, that's how we connected with former generations. That's how we captured lessons. That's how we wrote our history. That's how we shared our history. That's how we're connected to each other. Our brains are tuned to kind of perk up when a good story is told. And my guess is that many of you have been patiently listening to me today, and you've thought of a few stories about your team doing innovative things as well. I would love to hear those stories. So here on this slide, there's a link to a Google form where you can share your stories. I'll collect them, and depending on what the cat licks up, so to speak, I'll share them back with you. If you want to share your stories about innovation, I would love to hear them, and I'll share them back with you so that we can all kind of learn and grow from them. Again, I'll put this link in the chat. Let me put this in the chat right now, actually, and then you can go there. But it's also found on the slideshow. Let's see if I can copy that. Move it over here into the chat. There it is. Okay, so that link is there in the chat. You can also find it on the slideshow. I would love to hear your stories. I want to hear how we're doing when it comes to innovation. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. Thanks for being here. Again, remember, next month we have Dr. Dan Chase. He's going to talk about organizational pride. Basically, help your people feel great about where they work. Organizational pride. That's next month. Watch for a sign-up email the first week of September. And there's that resources page I promised you. That'll come out with the slides in just a little bit. Thank you again for your time and attention. Hope to see you again soon.